I came home to find my wife's wedding ring melted into the floorboards. The house was gone, my kids were gone, and the smell of gasoline still hung in the air 3 days later. Everyone called it an accident, but I knew better. Someone had turned my family into ghosts, and they were about to find out what happens when you burn a soldier's world to ash. Like the video, subscribe for more betrayal twists, and comment where you're watching from, your city or your country. The flight back from deployment felt longer than it should have. 12 hours in the air, cramped seats, stale coffee, but none of that mattered. I was going home, back to Harper, back to Ivy and Tristan, back to the life I'd been dreaming about for 8 months straight. I'd been stationed overseas running tactical training ops in a place I couldn't name, doing work I couldn't talk about. It was hard, lonely. But every night before I closed my eyes, I'd picture Harper's smile, Ivy's laugh when I chase her around the yard, Tristan asking me 1,000 questions about planes and tanks and anything that moved. That's what kept me going. When the plane finally touched down, I didn't even wait for my duffel. I grabbed my phone, turned it on, and called Harper. No answer. I frowned. Maybe she was at the grocery store or picking up the kids from school. I tried again. Still nothing. A weird feeling started crawling up my spine. I shook it off. I was just tired, paranoid from too many years watching my back in war zones. I caught a cab to our neighborhood, a quiet street on the edge of town where everyone knew everyone. Trees lined the road, kids played on porches. It was the kind of place you raised a family and felt safe. But when the cab turned onto my block, I saw the smoke. Not heavy, not fresh, but lingering, like a ghost that wouldn't leave. And then I saw it. Our house, or what was left of it. The entire structure was gutted, black, hollow. The roof had collapsed inward. The windows were shattered. Yellow caution tape wrapped around the front yard like a scar. A few neighbors stood on the sidewalk, arms crossed, whispering to each other. I didn't remember getting out of the cab. I didn't remember walking up the driveway. All I remember is standing there, staring at the wreckage, and feeling my chest cave in. Logan. I turned. It was Mrs. Daphne from next door. Her eyes were red. She looked like she'd been crying for days. Logan, I'm so sorry, she said, her voice breaking. They tried everything. The fire department came as fast as they could, but where's my family? I cut her off. She didn't answer. She just looked down. I grabbed her by the shoulders. Where are they, Daphne? They didn't make it out, she whispered. None of them. The world tilted. I let go of her and stumbled toward the house. A firefighter stepped in front of me, hands up. Sir, you can't go in there. It's not safe. My wife and kids are in there. Sir, get out of my way. He didn't move. 2 more firefighters came over. One of them was older, calmer. You put a hand on my shoulder. I'm sorry, soldier. I really am, but there's nothing left to see. The coroner's already been through. We'll release the remains to you once they're processed. Remains. That word broke something inside me. I dropped to my knees right there in the driveway. The older firefighter crouched beside me. Do they know what started it? I asked. Police think it was electrical. Old wiring in the basement. Happens more than you'd think. I looked up at him. Electrical? That's the working theory. I stood up slowly, my legs shaking. I walked past the tape, past the firefighters, and stopped at the edge of the burnt foundation. The smell hit me hard. Charred wood, melted plastic, and something else. Something chemical. Gasoline. I'd smelled it 100 times overseas in sabotage sites in ambush zones. You don't forget that scent. This wasn't an accident. I turned back to the firefighter. You said electrical? That's what the report's going to say. Then your report's wrong. He frowned. What do you mean? I mean someone burned my house down on purpose and my family died because of it. He exchanged a glance with the other firefighters. One of them muttered something under his breath. The older one sighed. Look, I get it. You're in shock. You want answers, but sometimes fires just happen. There's no villain here. It's just tragic. I stared at him for a long moment. Then I walked away. I spent the next 2 days at a motel on the edge of town. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Ivy's face. Tristan's stupid grin. Harper's hand in mine. The police came by on the 3rd day. 2 detectives. One named Quentin, the other named Blake. They sat across from me in the motel room, like they were doing me a favor. We're very sorry for your loss, Mr. Logan. Quentin said he had a notepad out but wasn't writing anything down. Tell me what happened, I said. Fire started around 2 o'clock in the morning. Neighbors reported hearing a loud noise, then saw flames. By the time the trucks arrived, the structure was fully engulfed. And you think it was electrical? Blake nodded. Old house, old wiring, it checks out. Did you test for accelerants? Quentin looked up. We did a preliminary sweep, nothing stood out. Then you didn't look hard enough. Blake leaned forward. Mr. Logan, I understand you're hurting, but we've been doing this a long time. Sometimes there's no conspiracy. Sometimes it's just bad luck. I clenched my fists under the table. My wife would never let faulty wiring go unchecked. She was careful, obsessive even. If something was wrong, she'd have called an electrician. Quentin closed his notepad. We'll keep the case open for now, but unless new evidence comes up, we're marking it as accidental. They left a few minutes later. I sat there in the silence, staring at the wall. They were lying, or lazy, or both. But I wasn't. I spent the next week combing through everything I could find. Insurance records, fire reports, neighbor interviews. Most people didn't want to talk. A few said they heard a car speeding away that night. One woman, Paige, a teacher who lived 2 houses down, said she saw a black van parked across the street earlier that evening. Did you tell the police? I asked. She hesitated. I mentioned it. They said it was probably nothing. I thanked her and left. A black van speeding away, gasoline in the air. This wasn't random. This wasn't an accident. Someone killed my family, and I was going to find out who. On the 10th day, I got a voicemail. Unknown number, no name. I played it, static. Then a man's voice, low and calm. Logan, stop digging. You won't like what you find. The line went dead. I sat there, phone in hand, heart pounding. They knew my name. They knew I was looking, and they were watching. I stood up, walked to the window, and stared out at the empty parking lot. Whoever you are, I thought you just made the biggest mistake of your life, because I wasn't just some grieving husband. I was a soldier, and I never left a mission unfinished. 3 weeks passed since the fire, and I still couldn't shake the smell of gasoline. It stuck to my clothes, my dreams, my thoughts. The official report said electrical malfunction. Everyone repeated it like scripture, but I'd seen too many real explosions to mistake one for bad wiring. The investigation barely scratched the surface. The police boxed up my entire life under the label accidental fire and moved on. I didn't move on. I started with what I had: the fire department reports, the insurance claim, the timeline. Half the files were missing pages, the rest were redacted. That wasn't an accident either. When I asked the lead investigator, Detective Quentin, he said I wasn't cleared to see everything yet. Cleared? Like I needed permission to learn why my family died. That night, I called an old military contact, Evan, who worked with the city's digital systems. He owed me a favor. The next day, he sent me access to archived city traffic cam feeds. At 2:07 a.m., 1 minute before the fire began, a black van turned off my street. I paused the footage, zoomed in. Mud on the plates blurred the last 2 digits, but I could still see the first 3. 47B. 40 seconds later, the frame lit up white. My home became a torch. No one ever mentioned that van. No one even looked. Later that day, I visited the ashes where my house once stood. The smell wasn't gone completely. The ground still carried pieces of my family. The neighbors avoided eye contact now, like saying hello was too painful. Paige, the teacher who saw the van that night, was outside watering her small patch of garden. She hesitated when she saw me. I already told the cops everything, she whispered. I'm not the cops, I said calm. You said the van was parked before the fire. Do you remember how long? She nodded faintly. A while, at least an hour before the flames. I thought it was some electrician. He wore a bright vest. Reflective, yes. Orange. I think he walked behind your fence. That meant someone planned the ignition. They pretended to be maintenance, planted something near the foundation, then vanished. I thanked her quietly, handed her my card, and walked away. In the official documents, an insurance agent's name appeared several times. Felix Morrow. He filed my payout just 2 days after the fire, speed processing the claim before I even returned home. No one pushes paperwork that fast, unless they're scared of what a delay might reveal. I decided to meet him. Felix's office was glass and chrome, the kind of place that smelled expensive. Suits walked in and out pretending to care about people's tragedies. When I stepped up to reception, I used a fake name and told them I needed policy advice. Felix greeted me with polished charm. His handshake was too warm for a stranger's. His smile practiced. I like to help families move forward. He said he didn't recognize me at first. Too many faces, too many signed papers. When I finally said my real name, something flickered behind his eyes. You're Logan Pierce. The officer was, I corrected now, just a husband wondering why my claim was fast-tracked before the investigation closed. His pen froze mid-spin. It's standard procedure in tragic cases. Standard procedure or special request. The smile slipped for a moment, just enough for me to see the truth underneath. Then he leaned forward. Mr. Pierce, maybe you should focus on healing instead of reliving nightmares. Closure is important. Closure. The word almost made me laugh. I left without another word. That night, I hacked into the insurance company's voicemail archive using credentials Felix had written down on his desk calendar, carelessly, like a man who'd never been hunted. The messages synced to my laptop. One stood out. Timestamp. 1 day before the fire. A woman's voice spoke first. So, it's Saturday. Felix replied smoothly. Saturday, 2 a.m. He won't be back till Monday. She laughed softly. He really trusts her, doesn't he? Then the call ended abruptly. Something about that laugh, soft, familiar, made my stomach turn. I replayed it over and over until it hit me. I'd heard that voice before. Harper, my wife. I sat there frozen. The laptop fan hummed, the room silent except for that voice replaying in my head. There was no mistaking it. Her tone, her rhythm, it was Harper, Felix Harper, Saturday, 2 a.m., the night. Everything burned. I opened Harper's old half-damaged phone I'd kept from the debris. It took hours, but eventually I revived the storage enough to view unsent texts. There was one message dated the evening before the fire. Just half a sentence saved, but not sent. Felix, I can't do this anymore. If he ever finds out, nothing after that. No signature, no time mark. Just a blinking cursor that would never finish the thought. I stared at it for a long time. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. I loved Harper with everything I had. She was my anchor, my calm after wars I don't even talk about. I fought for her, built my world for her. And now, one voicemail and 10 words from an unfinished text raised a question that could destroy all of it. Had she really betrayed us, or did Felix pull her into something she couldn't escape? Near midnight, my phone buzzed again. No ID. When I answered, there was silence, then a low male voice, the same one from before. I told you, Logan, stop digging, you don't want to know. He hung up. I sat in the dark motel room, staring out at the empty street. I wasn't sure what scared me more anymore. That my wife might have betrayed me, or that she hadn't, and this was only the start. Either way, I wasn't stopping. Because love, once burned, doesn't die, it hunts. The next morning began like any other since the fire. Silent, colorless, unreal. But this time, there was purpose burning behind the stillness. The kind I hadn't felt since my service days. The kind that turns grief into mission. Harper's voice from that voicemail echoed in my head every second. If he ever finds out, find out what? That she'd been seeing Felix? That she helped him? Or that she was trapped in something far darker? The only way to know was to follow every trace she left behind. I started with her phone again, the one pulled from the wreckage. The outer shell was blackened, half melted, but the memory chip had survived. I connected it to my laptop and copied everything I could dig out of the storage. Photos, memos, notes, deleted files. Most were family pictures, notes from school, grocery lists, mundane pieces of life that didn't belong in the world she'd apparently fallen into. Then came something unexpected, a folder named Charity Updates. Inside were hundreds of transfer logs tied to a foundation sheet, Kororon, a charity that looked good on paper, but funneled massive sums into shell accounts, and every final recipient ID linked back to someone named Felix Morrow. I hadn't noticed that before. The charity wasn't charity, it was cover. Money laundering hidden under donations and social work paperwork. That's why my insurance claim went through so fast. Felix didn't want to dissect it. Everything was connected. I drove to the bank that handled her charity's funds using my retired military ID to access the archived logs under legal audit claim. It was riskier than I liked, but worth it. The logs confirmed what I feared. Harper's signature appeared on several transfers, leading to offshore accounts tagged Project Phoenix. I printed one sheet, folded it into my jacket pocket, and left before anyone noticed. Outside, the air bit with winter's edge. My breath came out in sharp lines as I watched people walk past. Ordinary lives still intact. Mine had become evidence. That afternoon, I found myself parked outside Felix's office again. I wasn't there to confront him this time. I was there to watch. People said anger made you reckless. They were wrong. Real anger makes you patient. Felix left around 7 p.m., walking fast. No briefcase tonight, no jacket either. He got into a dark SUV, not a black van but close enough. I followed at a distance eastbound out of downtown. He turned off near the industrial sector down a gravel road that ended beside an abandoned mill. No sign, no lights, just corrugated metal walls and a locked gate. He parked inside the fenced area, so that's where he went when he wasn't burning people's homes or smiling through insurance meetings. I waited until he disappeared into the building, then swung around the back, cutting through a line of bare trees. A small vent glowed faintly, light leaking through. I crouched and looked in. Inside were 4 people around a table. Felix sat at the center, gesturing sharply. A woman I didn't recognize. Sharp eyes, business clothes, read something off her tablet. 2 other men loaded crates stamped with strange initials. H01, H02. My jaw tightened. H. Harper's initial. For a second, it didn't feel real. Felix laughed at something the woman said and raised a glass of dark liquor. I took out my phone, hit record through the vent. Every frame, every word mattered. If the cops wouldn't care, someone would. Then the woman spoke clearly, her voice cutting the hum in my head. Delivery confirmed. No one suspects this was the same address job. We stay quiet. We're ghosts. Felix smirked. Ghosts don't burn, they build new fires. My grip around the phone tightened until it hurt. They weren't just killers. They were proud of it. I stayed until well past midnight, watching, gathering what I could. They eventually shut the lights off and left one by one, driving separate routes. I noted every plate, every turn. Felix was last to leave. His SUV pulled out, slowed by a band, and for the first time, I saw it clearly. 3 numbers, 2 letters. 47BLZ. The same pattern as the van from the footage. That was all I needed to tie them to the fire. By dawn, I was back at the motel reviewing footage and notes like a detective obsessed. Coffee cups lined the counter. My hands shook from caffeine and exhaustion, but I couldn't stop. The doorbell buzzed suddenly. I froze. Nobody ever visited. I reached for the small pistol I kept stashed under the nightstand. Opened the peephole. Just a teenage boy, maybe 16. Dirty sneakers, nervous eyes. "Are you Logan?" he asked as soon as I cracked the door. "Who wants to know?" He looked down the hall first, then back at me. "You don't know me, but my brother works for the fire cleanup team. They found something in the foundation they weren't supposed to. He told me to give you this before they took it." He handed me a small evidence bag, scorched metal, half-melted plastic tubing. "What is this?" I asked quietly. "A timer, the kind used for controlled burns. Industrial grade, someone set your house to ignite remotely." He stepped back like even being near me was dangerous. "Just don't tell anyone I gave you that," he whispered and walked off fast, disappearing around the corner. I closed the door slowly, holding that piece of evidence in my palm. A remote triggered ignition. This wasn't grief anymore. This was calculated murder. The next hour blurred by as I examined every inch of that object. A faint serial number scratched at the bottom. Half gone, but enough. Phoenix Industries. Same word I'd seen in Harper's financial transfers. Project Phoenix. The world felt suddenly very small. If Harper knew what Felix planned, was she part of it, or was she silenced before she could stop it? I needed answers buried where they'd never want me looking next, inside the systems Felix used to hide his crimes. And I had the skills to get there. They burned my family, thinking I'd break. But all they did was teach me who I'm really capable of being again. The mill sat 2 miles outside town, abandoned from the outside, alive from within. It smelled like rust, oil, and something far less innocent, power. I knew the type of men who hid in places like this, the kind who believed secrecy was the same as safety. They hadn't met me yet. For 2 nights straight, I observed from the treeing, camouflaged like I used to on recon assignments. Felix's black SUV arrived each evening same time. 2 other vehicles followed. An old van and a silver sedan that never used headlights until inside the gates. They were careful, professional. But there's one thing I learned in service. Everyone repeats a pattern when they believe nobody's watching. Through my lens, I saw crates marked with the same initials again. H01, H02, H03. Always handled gently, loaded onto pallets, wrapped like high V-value cargo. If those weren't supplies or cash, they were evidence. Early that 3rd night, as fog drifted off the river, I caught sight of something. Felix shaking hands with a tall man in a gray coat. His guard posture gave him away. Ex-military like me. He passed Felix a small black case and pointed toward the crates. They spoke too quietly to hear, but whatever it was, Felix grinned when he opened the case. Inside it shimmered gold, literally thin stacks of clean bills. That mill wasn't a hideout, it was their vault. I shifted slightly to reposition the camera. The earth crunched under me just once. The man in the gray coat looked up instantly, head turning exactly in my direction, training reflexes. He scanned the tree scene for a few seconds, but didn't advance. I held still, not even breathing, until they finally went back inside. That confirmed it. Whoever they were, they hadn't just killed my family by mistake, they killed them to protect whatever Operation Phoenix really was. The following morning, I drove to a digital audit firm run by a retired analyst named Morgan, someone I'd once protected during a hostage retrieval years ago. She owed me her life. She didn't ask questions when she saw my face. I handed her the drive containing Harper's financial logs and a few of Felix's meeting photos. I need to know what connects these accounts, I said. The transfers labeled Phoenix Industries. She plugged the drive in, fingers flying across the keyboard. Green code streamed down her screen like rain. Phoenix Industries is a dummy corporation, she said after a minute, registered under a holding name that doesn't exist. Guess who signed it? Felix? Not exactly. A joint signature. Harper's and Kendra Rose. That name I remembered. Kendra was the woman from the mill meeting, the one reading from her tablet. Morgan glanced at me. Logan, if Harper signed this, she either knew what was being moved or she didn't understand what she was signing on to. She wasn't stupid, I said quietly. She would have known. Morgan hesitated. Then maybe she was forced. Her digital signature is duplicated. Could be a forgery. That stopped me cold. Forged signatures meant fabrication. Someone wanted Harper involved, even if she wasn't. That night, I returned to the mill, this time, not just to watch, to listen. I set up a listening mic 200 yards out, attached to a parabolic dish, calibrated with X-field precision. The static cleared, voices filtered through. Kendra, the peer situations contained, insurance finalized. Felix, yeah, but Logan's snooping. He visited the office. Kendra, then handle it, Felix. He's not some random husband, Kendra. He's military trained. We don't handle people like him unless we're sure. Kendra, then make sure. Felix sighed. We already lost Harper. She panicked before the job. He stopped talking. Static buried the rest. But I didn't need more. Her name. We already lost Harper. Lost. How? Killed. Missing. Hidden. Adrenaline hit my bloodstream like ice water. They thought my wife was dead too, but how could that be? Who filed her name on post-mortem unless they knew exactly where she went? The next morning, I visited the county morgue pretending to finalize release papers. Inside the fire records file, there were 4 death certificates listed under Pierre's family, but one was strange. Harper's record didn't have a body code, only presumed deceased. Everyone else had remains identified. That wasn't normal. You don't write presumed after confirmed household fatalities unless you're hiding something. A photo of the cremation tag log showed another irregularity. Her slot digit was never recorded as used. In simple terms, she was never cremated. My pulse quickened. Felix lied to someone. Harper's not ashes. She's somewhere between missing and erased. At sunset, I drove far past the mill and pulled into an overlook. From up there, everything looked peaceful, lights flickering in town, the distant hum of freight trains. To everyone else, life carried on, but beneath it, something rotten was moving unseen. I played the recording from last night again. Yeah, but Logan's snooping. That line looped in my head. They knew me now, which meant any move forward had to be surgical. I stared at the photo I'd taken of Felix through my scope, his profile lit by a hanging bulb inside the mill. And I made a promise, not out loud, but deep inside. I wouldn't storm in with rage. I'd take them apart piece by piece, the same way they destroyed my world. The difference was when I was done, there wouldn't be ashes this time, only truth. By now, everything pointed back to Felix and Kendra, but there was still one thing missing, proof strong enough to bring them down. The mill was crawling with armed watchers. Sneaking close again wasn't an option. So, I went where criminals always get sloppy, their paperwork. Felix and Kendra were too polished to leave evidence lying around, but someone else working for them might have. Inside the city, there was a corporate wing that handled commercial leases. Phoenix Industries was listed as an inactive tenant. I walked into their office building pretending to be an electrician doing maintenance checks for the property owner. My badge looked official enough to pass the front desk. The fourth floor was quiet, lights dimmed, everything sterile, but the back office door had a simple lock. 2 clicks later I was inside. Rows of boxes lined the walls. Financial reports, letters, black folders stamped private trust. At the bottom of one stack I found an envelope marked Moraro. Inside, a USB drive. I pocketed it and left carefully, resetting every light switch like I'd never been there. Back at my motel, I plugged it in. The folder name made my stomach drop, Charity Harper, along with a set of audio files dated within a week of the fire. The voice on the first recording was Felix's, calm as always. "She doesn't trust me anymore. You said she would." A woman's voice. Kendra's answered. "She'll come around, she's scared, not stupid." Felix sighed. "If she talks to him, we're done. The Pierce guy is not clueless." Then Kendra remind her what's at stake. The clip stopped. The next audio file started with Harper's voice. "I can't keep lying to him, my husband will find out." Kendra, "No, he won't. You keep smiling, keep pretending it's fine." Harper, "He'll notice the money. I didn't sign up for this. I thought we were funding research. You're burning people's homes." Felix interrupted coldly. "And you're funding it, Harper. You don't stop now, you're already too deep." Her breathing changed, trembling. "You promised no one would get hurt." Felix said nothing. The silence was heavier than a confession. When the file ended, I just sat there. My wife hadn't been cheating. She'd been drowning in something she couldn't control. Every instinct to hate her turned to guilt. She was trapped, forced into a financial web she couldn't untangle, and it killed her, or forced her to disappear. I replayed the file 3 times until I noticed static cutting in near the end. Beneath it, faint but there a second layer of sound. I isolated it, filtered out background noise. It was a location tracker tone like the one from Field Ops equipment. The coordinates flashed briefly. Millage sector, same place as Felix's hideout. So, she had been there, maybe still was. At dawn, I drove out again, parking 2 miles away. The fog lay heavy. I scanned the area with a tactical scope, sweeping the perimeter of the mill. A metal door near the foundation looked different this time. New lock, new bar. Behind it, faint light bled out. They were hiding something or someone underground. I checked my watch, waited until the guards rotated at shift change, then moved down silently through the brush. I reached the side panel, crouched low, and pried the latch loose just enough to slip in my mic sensor. Voices echoed through the receiver. "Kendra, you should have stayed dead. Harper, you need me alive. You wouldn't get funded otherwise. Felix, keep talking like that and you'll end up like the kids." Every word stabbed, so Harper wasn't dead, she was alive, locked beneath that place, bargaining for her life, using the money they couldn't access without her. I withdrew before they rotated again. Every step calm, deliberate. This wasn't about mourning anymore. It was extraction. They burned my home, thinking it would bury the truth, but the truth was breathing right under their feet. Harper was alive. The thought repeated in my head for hours like a glitch I couldn't turn off. The woman they'd said died in that fire was somewhere under that mill, breathing the same cold air I was. I'd spent weeks mourning her, imagining her screams and the flames. And now she was a prisoner beneath the same people who murdered our kids. Rage and relief twisted inside me at once. One part wanted to burn that place down to ashes. The other knew timing could save her life or lose it forever. So I waited, watched, planned. Through the scope, I noted the guards' rotation cycles. 6 men switching every 2 hours. Routine, slack, overconfident, professionals in theory, sloppy in rhythm. Routine kills people who think they're untouchable. On the 3rd night, I went in. Silently, I crossed through the drain route leading under the foundation. Inside, the air was damp, heavy with the smell of diesel and fear. Pipes rattled above my head, carrying sound from somewhere deeper. Voices. I followed them until the hall opened into a small concrete chamber. A single light buzzed above. Chains. A chair bolted to the floor. And there, Harper. She looked smaller, frier, hair matted, eyes wide as if she thought I was another nightmare walking through the door. She whispered, "Logan." I froze, hearing her voice again. Almost broke me. "I thought you were," she started before I cut her free. "We don't have time," I said, keeping my voice low. "How long have they kept you here since the fire?" She exhaled. "They forced me to sign transfer papers. I thought our family would be safe if I cooperated. I didn't know her voice cracked. "I didn't know they'd kill the kids, Logan. They promised it was just intimidation." Her words hit like shrapnel. I wanted to hate her, to yell, but all I could manage was a whisper. You knew about them? Tears smeared the soot on her cheeks. I tried to warn you. I left you a message before it all burned. They erased everything. I knelt beside her. Felix did this to control you. She nodded quickly. He runs Phoenix. But Kendra, she's worse. She knows how to make files disappear. People vanish. She has someone inside the police and the insurance board. You can't just walk away. They record everything. I press my hand against hers. Then we'll record them. Her eyes lifted to mine. A flicker of hope buried under exhaustion. Can you walk? I'll try. We moved quietly through the tunnel, taking the exit through a broken ventilation shaft. By dawn, I had her hidden in an old hunting cabin deep in the woods, a place I used for survival drills years ago. There, she told me everything. How Felix had approached her during a charity fundraiser, offering to handle donations for her cause. How Kendra used Harper's name and foundation to launder millions from arms contracts disguised as philanthropic aid. When Harper discovered it, she threatened to go to the police. That same night, Kendra sent a message. Think of your children before doing anything foolish. That was their pattern. Fear first, fire second. Harper's lips trembled as she said it. Felix said if I played along until the transfers cleared, he'd stage a fire so I could disappear safely. He promised you'd be unharmed. He lied. I leaned back, staring at the floorboards shaking from the wind outside. Every moment since the fire replayed differently now. Every clue, every whisper. My grief had been built on a lie. At the mill, I said slowly. They're still processing Phoenix shipments. She nodded. Tomorrow night, Kendra is sealing the last deal before dismantling operations. After that, no more paper trail, no more leverage. Then tomorrow's their last night. Breathing free, Harper stared at me. Logan, what are you planning? The same thing I've done all my life, I said quietly, finishing what others start. She reached for me then, fingers trembling. I never meant for this. I know. She looked away, eyes glistening. Will it bring them back? No, I said softly, but it'll end the people who took them. That night, I mapped the mill on paper using every piece of intel I'd collected. Exits, elevation points, security blind spots. I wasn't going in like a soldier this time. I was going in like a ghost. Morality ends where mercy's already dead. Using my old field gear, I planted micro cameras 200 yards out, linking them to a remote drive at the cabin. Harper monitored feed while I prepped motion sensors for the entrances. If things went wrong, at least I'd have proof uploaded. When darkness fell, everything moved exactly as predicted. Felix, Kendra, and their team arrived, cutting engines, slipping inside. But this time, the walls had eyes. Every crate they labeled, every conversation near the office was recorded. And then I caught the key line I'd been waiting for. Kendra's voice through the transmitter. Tomorrow we clear the vault. Once Phoenix funds transfer, we torch the site. No witnesses again. Felix chuckled. What about her? Kendra smirked. Nobody survives 2 fires. Harper heard it too. Her breathing hitched through the radio. I said nothing, just watched, because now I didn't need to imagine revenge. It was already unfolding. The only thing left was timing. Tomorrow they'd burn the mill to erase the last trace of their crimes. Tomorrow they'd find out what it feels like to stand in the middle of a trap they set themselves. Morning came cold and silent. The cabin smelled of damp wood and gun oil. Harper sat near the window, staring at the mist rising through the trees. Her hands wrapped around a mug she hadn't touched in an hour. The truth hung between us like fog, heavy, unmoving. We didn't speak much. Words were useless now. Everything had shifted after last night's revelation. She wasn't the betrayer anymore. She was the proof that betrayal lived in others. By noon, I was ready. I had one shot to end this without losing her again. I told Harper to stay put and keep the cameras online. She insisted on coming with me, but I couldn't risk it. They'll expect me, I said. Not you. She pressed something into my hand before I left. A small silver locket. Ivy's, she said softly, for luck. Luck hadn't done much for me lately, but I took it anyway. I hooked it to my wrist strap where I could feel the weight. By twilight, the mill looked different. The place that once felt alive now breathed dread. Quiet, too quiet. Their vehicles were parked outside as always, but the workers were gone, retreated to the underground section Harper described. I slipped inside one of the broken windows near the west wing. The air carried the same scent of gasoline I'd once smelled at the fire. History had a way of repeating itself when killers thought nobody remembered the smoke. The corridors echoed faint metallic sounds. I froze, then followed them down a stairwell until the concrete opened into the lower level. A bunker with cables, crates, and stacked servers glowing faint blue. Project Phoenix etched on every casing. Footsteps, voices. Felix's voice clear above the rest. Once this last batch clears, we vanish. No names, no faces. Kendra already moved the funds. The only variable left is Harper and her husband. Kendra answered casually. He's probably tearing himself apart right now. Felix laughed. Good. Let guilt eat him. Dead men don't chase ghosts. I took one more step and saw them both standing by the table filled with burner phones and ledgers. Felix looked older, angrier. Kendra looked amused. I sharp enough to cut. I hit record on my hidden camera pen and let them talk. Kendra leaned closer to Felix. What if Harper talks? She won't, Felix said grimly. We'll let the fire finish the story again. She can't run that far twice. Kendra nodded, started pouring fuel from a small container around the floor edges and him. Felix smirked. Let him find her corpse again. It'll break him for good. Fuel hissed across the concrete. The smell brought every nightmare rushing back. That was enough recording. I slipped back quietly, found another exit near the supply aisle, and pushed out into the open air before they ignited the fuse. Outside, the fog carried the faint orange reflection of the flames below. I called Harper. They're lighting it again. Her tone snapped into focus. The files, did you get them recorded? Yes. I'm heading your way now. You need to send everything to the federal contact from your charity boards. The investigator, Julian Grant. He's clean. I'll send it. Do it now, Harper, then lock the cabin door until I get there. She didn't answer right away. I heard her breathing instead, shaky but determined. Logan. Yeah, if I don't make it through this, tell them I tried. You will, I said. We both will. I ended the call and turned toward the tree line where my truck was hidden, but that's when I saw headlights. 2 sets coming fast. They'd found her feet. I ran flat into the forest, cutting through mud and branches, the glow of the burning mill behind me like a second sunrise. My boots hit ground steady fast. I reached the ridge overlooking the road, just as 2 SUVs passed below, black, tinted, and heading toward the direction of the cabin. No more time for planning. I jumped into the truck and drove off-road straight north, shortcutting through the logging path. The windshield cracked under tree branches, but I didn't stop. I reached the cabin 20 minutes later, smoke, silence. The door was open, the cameras over the porch were smashed. Inside, chaos. Tables overturned, wires ripped out, Harper gone. My heart pounded as I searched the floor. A chair knocked over, a set of boot prints leading back toward the woods. Male size. 1 drag mark. Then something caught my eye under the desk. The locket. Its chain snapped. I picked it up. Still warm. Outside, a single set of tire tracks cut through the mud. Same ridge pattern as Felix's SUVs. They'd taken her again, but this time the difference was simple. Now, I knew where they'd go. They'd only built one exit plan, one safe route back to disappear, east through the shipping docks their company owned. And they just handed me the perfect final location. They wanted another fire. They were about to get one. The docks were the kind of place no one questioned noise after dark. Trucks rolled, cranes groaned, and the smell of salt and steel masked everything else. It was the perfect place for a disappearance. For them, maybe not for me. Felix and Kendra thought their operation was invisible, that nobody watched what happened under the floodlights. But I'd once hunted men in barren deserts using nothing but their tire patterns and heartbeat over radio. This was easier. By 9 p.m., a cold drizzle started sweeping across the port. I waited from high ground, my truck hidden between shipping containers. Across the pier, 3 black SUVs idled near Warehouse 17, Phoenix Industries' main export dock, exactly where Harper had said they moved cash through old freight crates marked medical supplies. Through my scope, I saw everything. Kendra issuing commands. Felix pacing like a cornered wolf. 2 guards stood outside, both alert. Weapons slung under their jackets. Inside, the glow of computer screens flickered through the glass office upstairs, and there, a shadow, bound at the wrists, sitting in the corner. Harper. She was alive, but motionless. My jaw locked tight. Everything in me wanted to charge right in. But that kind of rage gets people killed. I needed to make Felix believe he was safe, right until the ground gave out under him. I spent the first hour laying groundwork, literally. I planted 3 motion trigger devices across the loading bay, no explosives, just if surveillance beams, hooked to hidden cameras aimed at every angle of the building. Once tripped, every second of their crimes would stream live to an anonymous secure drive and auto-forward to national law enforcement servers. Quiet revenge doesn't mean silence, it means exposure. When the system went online, I called their number from a disposable phone Felix didn't know existed. It rang 3 times before he answered. "Logan Pierce," he said, almost a smile in his tone. "I expected you." "I bet you did," I said calmly. "But you should have expected me a lot sooner." "Harper's here," he replied. "Want her back? You come alone. No police. If I even think we're being watched, you'll do what?" I cut him off. "Light another match. You've already run out of houses to burn." He laughed softly, a sound that made my stomach twist. Bold. I almost admire that. "Good," I said flatly. "You'll get to admire it up close." Then I hung up. That was it. The last conversation he'd ever control. As I moved toward the pier, lightning cracked over the water. Wind started beating the structure. The base surface turned wild. Perfect cover noise for what was coming. I slipped in through the maintenance corridor behind Warehouse 16, crossing over to the thin bridge connecting it to 17. The air smelled of ocean rust and gasoline again. My boots echoed softly as I descended the metal stairs. Through the broken slats of the service bay, I could see Felix and Kendra by the crates. Felix's jacket was soaked, his voice echoing through the wet air. "Load the rest, then torch the remainder. No witnesses, no product, no trace." Kendra replied dryly, "And Harper, her too." Symbolic closure. He lit a cigarette. The orange spark briefly showed his face. Same unbothered calm he wore when shaking my hand in that polished office. Then a chime sounded on their control screens. My cameras had gone live. Felix didn't even realize it. Every word now broadcast directly through the data stream Harper had set up before they took her. I moved closer, staying low, every step calculated. The drizzle turned heavier, pounding against the metal roof and masking my movement. Inside, Harper stirred. Felix turned lazily, flicking ash aside. "Don't start crying again, sweetheart. You knew exactly how far this could go." She looked up at him, her voice. "You lied. You said it would end after the first job." "It did," Kendra said coldly, "until your husband decided he was a detective." Felix smirked. "Don't worry, he'll join you soon. We keep things tidy here." That was my cue. I stepped from the shadows, gun low but steady, rain dripping off my brow. "Funny," I said, voice even, because I was thinking the same thing. Felix spun, shock flickering into fury. "How the hell easy?" I said. "Call your guards off." Kendra scoffed. "You wouldn't shoot in a federal port." I smiled faintly. "You're right, I won't have to." As she frowned, I raised the small transmitter in my other hand. "This device has been streaming every second of your conversation since you bragged about burning my house. There's no shutting it off now. Look up." Felix turned toward the LED monitor above the dock. It had switched feeds showing live images from my hidden cameras. Him, Kendra, Harper tied up the fuel cans, the money crates, everything. "This is a closed network," he muttered. "Not anymore," I replied. "Your words are entering every public archive, including the Department of Justice database, the same one you file my insurance through." Kendra lunged toward the console. "Kill the feed," she yelled. Felix grabbed his weapon instead, pointing it at Harper. "Then we end this right now." I didn't flinch. "If you pull that trigger, every law enforcement server flags your live GPS. You won't make it to your car." Harper looked up at me, weak, terrified, but she knew what I was doing, stalling long enough for the upload. Lightning flashed again outside, shaking the windows. Felix's jaw flexed. "You think war makes you invincible?" "No," I said, "but it taught me patience." He fired anyway, a deafening echo smashing through the room. The bullet hit a support beam near Harper's shoulder, sparking dust. She screamed, ducking. I dove forward, hitting the switch that dropped the loading bay door shut. His men outside shouted, trapped out in the storm. One-on-one now before Felix could chamber another round, I slammed him across the jaw with the butt of my gun, sending him sprawling against the crates. Kendra reached for her sidearm, but I kicked the container door into her, knocking her backward. The monitors still streamed, capturing everything. Felix lunged, charging at me with desperate anger. We crashed into the stacked crates. Lightning illuminated his face, twisted with disbelief. "You ruined everything." "No," I breathed out, driving my elbow into his chest. "I just showed it to the world." We fought hand to hand until Kendra staggered up behind me, grabbing for her weapon. Harper moved faster, snapping the chair leg she was tied to across Kendra's wrist. The gun clattered away. Felix barely regained footing before the first sirens echoed under the storm. Faint but closing far too soon for coincidence. Harper gasped. The upload. It triggered their response. Felix froze mid-motion, his gun halfway raised. Realizing every exit around us now had flashing lights moving closer. He dropped his weapon, his arrogance finally cracked. I stepped closer to him. You wanted to bury us in fire, I said quietly. Now watch what truth burns like. Outside, police lights flooded the docks. Helicopters circled overhead. Officers stormed in moments later, shouting commands. Felix lifted his hands halfway, but Kendra wasn't done. She ran for the back exit, slipping behind the stacks. I didn't chase. I'd given the authorities every file tying both of them together. She could run, but where truth followed, there was no hiding. The agents tore through the warehouse, cuffing Felix as he cursed and spat, screaming name after name that meant nothing compared to what we'd already exposed. Harper leaned weakly against a pillar, tears mixing with the rain dripping through the ceiling. When the officers led Felix out, she looked at me quietly. It's over, she said. I shook my head slowly. Almost, because Kendra might still be somewhere out there, and I wasn't letting her vanish. Rain hammered the dock long after Felix was taken away. Blue and red lights flickered across the bay water like restless ghosts, and every sound of a siren felt like an echo of everything I'd lost. Harper sat wrapped in a medic's blanket on the steps, shaky but alive. For the first time in months, the weight of silence between us didn't feel like guilt. It felt like relief, but peace was too fragile to touch. Because while Felix was in chains, one name still lingered in the air like smoke. Kendra. She was still out there. She'd slipped through the chaos, vanished into the city, and if my instincts were right, she wasn't running. She was regrouping. By morning, agents from the Federal Bureau swarmed the site. They wanted statements, signatures, timestamps. I gave them everything. The files, the recordings, the full story. Harper sat beside me the whole time, silent until one agent asked if she knew where Kendra might go next. She always kept backups, Harper said, voice low. If Felix went down, Kendra would trigger the second part of Phoenix, the exit plan. She called it contingency range. The agent frowned. Range? An old military testing ground outside town? I said automatically. I remembered the name from my service days. A hollow training base turned private property years ago. The agent scribbled something down. We'll send a team, but I shook my head. No, she won't wait for you. She'll vanish before you even get the convoy ready. He paused. You know this area better than anyone. You going after her? I stood. I already am. Harper reached out. Logan, I met her eyes. You said you wanted it to end. This is the last piece. She nodded. Not trying to stop me anymore, because she understood this wasn't just about revenge. It was closure. The kind that didn't come from trials or judges. Only truth exposed completely. By dusk, I reached the old testing range. The landscape stretched like scar tissue, broken asphalt, half-buried bunkers, steel shells rusting under the gray sky. And there, beneath one collapsed hangar, I saw light flickering from inside. She was there. I moved slow, drawing closer through the downpour. My every step echoed over crumbled concrete, until the doorway came into view. Kendra was alone, standing beside several open servers glowing green, surrounded by crates of drives and files. She looked different now, softer in posture, but more dangerous for it. You're harder to kill than Felix believed, she said without turning around. Lucky accident, I replied, stepping closer. Her voice carried no fear. You realize none of this matters. Phoenix was bigger than one base, one deal. Felix was stupid. I wasn't. That's the thing about arrogance, I said quietly. People don't know when they're already exposed. She laughed once. You think sending a few files to the feds buries this? Men like Felix are copyable. The system replaces us faster than you can shoot. You're right, I said, setting the small transmitter on a rusted table. That's why I don't plan to shoot. Her brow furrowed slightly. What's that? Insurance. Just like you used on my wife. I clicked the switch. The room lights flickered. Sparks flashed along the cables connecting her servers. You didn't think Harper was the only one smart enough to reroute Phoenix's encryption? I said, stepping back. Every file in your database, the money, the accounts, the deals, is streaming right now from this terminal to public government archives, mirrored 100 ways. If you walk out of here, the story still burns across every channel before sunset. Her eyes widened. You wouldn't. I met her gaze. You all said the same thing about my house. She lunged forward, grabbing her sidearm, but the system behind her beeped 4 times in sequence. The upload complete. The servers hissed and went white-hot as hydrogen ignited from the back vents. Kendra froze, realizing her own failsafe was turning on her. What did you? I pulled Harper's locket from my pocket, started a new fire. I turned and walked out as the hangar began to rumble. Sparks cascaded through the steaming floorboards. I hit the ground outside just as the explosion rolled through the range. A deep thunderous roar that swallowed the horizon in orange. Heat washed against my back. The rain turned to steam around me. For a second, I could have sworn I heard distant echoes, voices of my children laughing from the old days, faint but clear. Maybe it was memory, maybe not. By the time authorities reached the blast zone, there was nothing left but char and circuitry twisted into glass. The files were all live and the agency confirmed every link tied Felix, Kendra, and half their network into evidence admissible worldwide. Phoenix was gone. For the first time since the fire, I didn't feel anger in my chest, just quiet. A few days later, I sat on the cliff above the bay, where our house once stood. The new foundation was being laid, small, sturdy, silent. Harper stood near the edge, wind catching her hair. She said softly, "What will you do now?" "Rebuild," I replied. "Not for them. For me?" She glanced down at my wrist where Ivy's locket still hung. "That wasn't revenge, was it?" I shook my head slowly. "No, it was truth. And truth when it burns cleans deeper than fire." She smiled faintly, a tired human smile. For once we didn't talk about what came next. We just stood there, 2 people who'd already lost everything, watching smoke finally drift into peace. In that silence, the war finally ended. Not with gunfire, but with proof that even lies buried deep can't survive the light forever. They burned my family's house, thinking they'd silenced every witness. But all they really did was teach me how to build fire that doesn't die. Again, not until the story and the people behind Phoenix were all ash. There's a strange silence that follows justice. Not loud, not triumphant, just still. A silence you don't hear in the middle of war or revenge. It's the sound of peace trying to find its place again after being lost for too long. I heard that silence for the first time as I stood at the cliff overlooking the bay. The same place where my house once stood. But now, instead of burnt ground, there was new life sprouting through the ash. Grass thin as thread, a small sapling bending with the wind. Nature moved on quietly, and I was learning to do the same. The world moved quickly after the range explosion. News broke like wildfire. Phoenix Industries exposed, multi-million-dollar fraud, and arson network dismantled. Felix's smug picture plastered every news channel, his associates paraded in handcuffs. But truthfully, I didn't celebrate when the broadcast ended. Justice for me wasn't them getting caught. It was the fire inside me finally burning out. Kendra didn't survive the blast. Her body was never recovered. Part of me expected it. People like her never surrender. They vanish one last time, leaving the world unsure whether to feel pity or fear. But I didn't need closure from her death. The story was no longer about her. Harper sat beside me in every hearing, her testimony sharper than any lawyer's argument. Watching her face those men who tried to own her broke something inside me and fixed something too. She no longer looked caged by guilt. She looked free. When it was all over, she chose to disappear. Not the way they forced her to before, but on her own terms this time. A cabin up north, near the edge of a lake where no one asked questions. I didn't stop her. We both understood that some love survives only when it's given distance. I rebuilt the house a few miles inland from where the old one stood. Not the same structure, a smaller one, quieter. I wanted a different on purpose. The walls stayed bare at first. I didn't want memories staring back at me, but soon, I began hanging photos. Not old ones, but new moments from people I met while building again. Harper's fund for fire victims grew fast. She called it Project Renewal. Every cent came from Phoenix's confiscated accounts. Families who lost homes like I did now had somewhere to start again. It was poetic, almost cruel, how the same blood money that caused so much ruin was being used to rebuild other lives. Sometimes she called to give updates, her voice lighter each time. "We helped 6 families this month," she'd say quietly. I'd smile without saying much. The details didn't matter. Only the fact that she was healing did. At night, the bay glowed faintly beyond the horizon. The reflection of lights rippling on the water like slow fire. That used to haunt me. Now, it reminded me of survival. I understood what I couldn't back then. Yahan is part Kapura paraphrase he, same length Rakihe, meaning Wahihe. That vengeance was never the opposite of forgiveness. It was its shadow instead. You could only truly forgive after facing the darkness honestly, without flinching away from it. I kept just one thing from that final night, Harper's locket, holding photos of Ivy and Tristan inside. I'd cleaned it carefully, polishing the silver until the engraving became visible again. Home isn't walls, it's who we come back to. Every single morning, I placed it beside the stones I had carved for them out in the yard. I didn't pray, I didn't speak to ghosts. I simply stood there quietly until the grief settled enough to let me start the day. Sometimes the neighborhood kids would fly paper airplanes across the field, and I'd find one caught in my fence. I'd smile, thinking of my own son doing exactly the same thing, laughing from a window that no longer existed. They were gone, yes, but they weren't lost to memory. That was the difference I'd spent an entire year learning to understand. The government offered me commendations for uncovering Phoenix. I turned them all down. Awards don't fix loss. They only dress up pain with polished metal. I didn't want medals. I wanted meaning. I found that meaning one evening when a young man showed up at my gate, a former soldier, thin, anxious, his eyes hollowed out by the kind of guilt war leaves behind. He told me, "I watched your story online, the one about your family. It stopped me from doing something stupid." He didn't need to say anything more. I understood completely. That's when it became clear to me that real justice had nothing to do with exposing criminals or simply surviving tragedy. It was found in warning others before they burned the same way I once did. So I began speaking again, to veterans, to people rebuilding after loss, to survivors of betrayal who believed they'd never feel whole again. My words weren't rehearsed, they were scars spoken out loud. And that's exactly what made people listen. Every time someone asked me, "How did you survive it all?" I gave them the same answer. I didn't survive. I rebuilt. One night, months later, Harper called unexpectedly. She'd been working at her new center, tired but genuinely happy. "You ever feel like the fire still follows you?" she asked. I thought about that for a moment. "No," I said softly. "I carry it differently now, inside me. Not to burn anymore, but to remind me how to feel." She stayed quiet, then whispered, "Do you think they'd be proud of us?" I looked up at the stars that night, faint reflections of something that once burned far brighter. "They already are," I said, and for the first time, I truly believed it. Time never actually healed me. It simply taught me how to live alongside what could never be repaired. My revenge stopped being about destruction. It became about protecting everything that remained. Memory, dignity, hope. No, I never forgave the men who burned my family alive. But I forgave myself for letting their fire define who I became. Because real healing was never about forgetting. It's about refusing to become the ending of their story. And so instead, I wrote my own.